This video is sponsored by Squarespace. This is going to be your quick startup guide for this baby, so you might want to save this video now. I'm going to give you a lot of information. You'll probably want to come back to it later as you're likely not going to memorize everything. What I want to go over are all the different buttons on the cameras, the best way to set up your focusing system for maximum success, and then of course some of the pretty staple standard ways that I set things up in the menu that's going to make it easier for you to use this camera and be happy with the results. So let's dive in. First up, let's talk about all of the buttons here that you're definitely going to use at some point. Let's just take a photo because got to start there, right? This is a bumblebee from my Shearer collection. So down here on the bottom, I'm going to start with these. We've got our play button. This is how we play back. We can use the thumb here to go between different photos. While you're here, you can choose to delete a photo by pressing the delete button. If you are recording RAW and JPEG at the same time, which we'll go over those settings, you can choose to just erase the RAW or just erase the non-RAW, which would be technically JPEG, or erase everything. Another function we've got, see this blue right there? Little zoom functionality. So let's go ahead, while we press play, if I hit that, it's gonna zoom in. And this is really helpful for checking focus. You could also zoom in with your fingers if you want to move things around, check focus that way. If you want to zoom back out, just hit play. You can do a lot of what I'm going to do with touchscreen. I'll probably go back and forth, but your main dials from here are going to be these two buttons down there, or it's not a dial here, it's more like buttons, up, down, left, right. Up here, this is a dial, and we'll get into what that dial does and how it's set. This is factory set. I haven't changed anything out of this camera. This is how it comes out of the box. This button right here is your diopter. So when you look through here, you can actually adjust the lens. So by dialing this up or down, the image as you're looking through your electronic viewfinder is going to become sharper, and you dial it into your eye prescription specification. And then on the top, we also have a dial in the front there. And then we've got all of our dials for how we're going to photograph. I'm gonna keep it on manual for now. This is aperture priority, shutter priority program. If you don't know anything about shooting with cameras, you can just go right to this auto mode. It's gonna do wonderful things for you. If you have a flash, it will work with that as well. So here we've got our on off button, or flipping into movie mode is the last tab right there. This ISO button, we'll be using that when we want to change ISO. You hold that down and then use your thumb to dial through your ISO. And then of course up here we've got our shutter button. Again, I'm not going through every single thing right now, just going to go through things I think that you will use right off the bat. And then of course this little red one right here, that's your record button. So let's go ahead and flip into our manual mode and flip up. Nice thing about this camera, well, a lot of the Canon cameras, is you already automatically have a sort of walkthrough menu. So if you're flipping through your different types of modes, it's going to tell you what it is, and you tap down here and it will give you even more of an explanation. So it's just kind of nice to have, if you're learning photography, a little walkthrough menu so that you can sort of figure out on your own without having to watch a bunch of these YouTube videos. So for me, I like front button focus again, which is exactly how the camera comes out. So if I press the shutter button halfway, it's going to focus the camera, and you can see it's going right for her eye. You can tap on all these, change your shutter speed. You can change your aperture by tapping on it, and your ISO right there. Or this thumb dial, that changes your aperture. Up here, that top dial here, this is going to change your shutter speed. And if you want to change your ISO, you're going to hold that ISO button down, and then with your thumb, you're going to arrow through where you want to be. The touchscreen is great. So if you're looking through the electronic viewfinder here, it's not going to be easy to tap. You'll have to pull out the camera away from your face and then do some tapping. I have been using Squarespace for over a decade, and you can see it at vanessajoy.com. I decided to use Squarespace so long ago because it was one of the easiest, and still is, one of the easiest ways to make a website out there, hands down. Squarespace is a platform where you can create beautiful custom websites in just a few minutes. Choose from a plethora of templates where you can easily plug and play your own work. It's an all-in-one platform for building your brand and growing your business online. We all know that an online presence is crucial for your brand, so build one that stands out. Head over to this link for my exclusive 10% discount on your first domain at Squarespace. Now back to the video. The view that I have right here, you can change by hitting info. A lot of people get a little bit stuck on this. So info is a great place to come here. Maybe I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna change my kelvins. Maybe I'm gonna come in and change the raw stuff here. You can't tap here to do it, but you can use those dials and you can see my shutter speed changing. This is gonna change my aperture, and then holding the ISO, we'll be able to change that there. So if you get stuck there and you're like, why can't I see and take a picture? Just hit your info button. And with the info button, you can have like a minimal view here. You can have more things happening here. I tend to like this view personally because I do know what all these other functions are, and it's just showing me how my camera is set up. Now here, tapping on the Q is my best friend. So if I want to change something that's other than the shutter, aperture, or ISO, I'm gonna tap that Q. And this is gonna come up and give me the basic things that I want to change. So tapping on Q up in the upper right corner, starting over here, my autofocus. I always have my autofocus set typically to the spot or this one point. They are fairly similar. I think the spot autofocus is pretty easy to use. It's automatically with this camera going to have eye detection enabled. So it's just gonna find the face. And you can click and drag to focus on something else. Maybe you're gonna focus right there and then take the picture. And that one spot, it's gonna know, hey, I wanna focus on this, not on the eyeball. But the second you click closer to a face, now it's gonna start finding the eyeball for you. Servo, this is where I like to set up servo. I don't like to do one shot because that's not going to track the subjects. And one of the really nice things about this camera is the fact that the autofocus is so darn good. So I like to let the camera show off a little bit, and I hit servo. I sound like Bob Ross, doesn't he say that? Like little fluffy trees just show off, they're showing off. Anyway, I like to have the servo autofocus on, so it's gonna track subjects when they're moving. So I would hold down halfway, and then if Bumblebee was moving, watch how it just, see how the eyeball, it's just finding her eyeball. And then whenever I want, I can actually take the picture. When I am shooting, let's just say her face was here and my face is up to the viewfinder. If you notice that the viewfinder is turning off, it's because you've got something. This is your sensor right there that lets the camera know that, hey, I'm looking through, so I don't need this part showing. But if I'm here and I want to find her, I'm gonna, with my thumb, quickly tap to where she is, and then it's gonna find her for me. Another option for focusing, you see the center focus, you go, you know what, let me just put my center focus close to her eyeball. It's gonna find it. I'm still holding down halfway, and then as I'm holding down, I recompose the picture where I want it to be and then take a shot. Those are my basic ways of getting focus. Let's move on with some other menu options. This right here is where I promised we would talk about if you want to shoot RAW or JPEG or both. You can choose your JPEG options here. If you want to add RAW, you're going to tap on the RAW, and you can either shoot no RAW whatsoever and you're only going to shoot JPEG, full RAW right here, or compact RAW, which is going to give you a little bit more room on your memory card. Still a great file, just not as full of a file as RAW. I tend to shoot in RAW plus JPEG as a professional photographer. If you're not a professional photographer, you just want to take the photos out of your camera and throw them onto like your phone, which you could Wi-Fi from your phone, then maybe just shoot in JPEG, up to you. About the R7, I thought I would just take a second and go through some of my photos that I've taken with the R7 and show you how I would edit them. These three right here are JPEGs and the rest are RAW, so I can show you how I edit either one of those. In the Develop module here in Lightroom, usually the first thing I do is I scroll through and just look for the kind of vibe that I want the photo to be. These are my presets. You can use whatever presets that you want. Mine can be found at presets.breatheyourpassion.com. They're pretty standard, I would say. They're nothing like super crazy, and I tend to love this one right here. I just love the cool tone, so I'm going to stick with a cooler look here. And then I tend to like to bring up vibrance in an image, but come down on the saturation a little bit. So the vibrance is what brings up the colors that are not skin tones, and then the saturation brings up or down and everything else. So this lets me have more saturation in the photo without compromising the skin tones. And then for portraits especially, I really like coming down here to my sharpening tool, move it a little bit, usually like the masking around 80. So what this masking does is as I sharpen, it's just going to sharpen more of the edges, versus if I didn't have the masking on, it's going to sharpen, you know, all the other little things, which it doesn't matter much for kids, but you do that to somebody, I don't know, my age, and you start focusing all of her wrinkles, and we don't like that. All right, let's do this one here. I know I wanted like a vintage vibe. Ooh, I love that. That's my fresh and clean. That's one of my favorites. Little bit hot on my exposure, so I am gonna bring that down. And yeah, I love when I am photographing, kind of contrast to what I was just saying about the sharpening. When I'm photographing someone who is older and I want a really quick way to smooth out their skin tone, I go here to my clarity and I usually go down anywhere between 5 to 10. You don't want to do too much because then you get this really weird glow, but it's kind of fun to see what happens when you slide back and forth on those. We're just going to be really subtle about that. Clarity -8 for this one. It's just going to smooth out the skin. I think I'm going to go with this dehaze also. And then let's go down a little further. I want this one to kind of look like film. So we're going to dehaze and then I'm going to scroll down. So we're going to come all the way down here to my effects and this here grain. Now let me zoom in so you can actually see what's happening here. So let's just turn it off completely. See all the grain that's introduced, all like the dots. That's what we're doing. We're adding grain, which is a characteristic of film. So I'm going to add it really heavily just so you can see what we're doing. And then the size we can change. So once you have the size of the roughness, you can always adjust the grain up or down. I like to make it subtle. I don't want to go super crazy, but I just want that like vintage film look to here. So you can see that before and after. Those are just some photos that I edited that I thought you would like to see how I edit them. Anyway, back to the video. Now here, this is my drive mode. I like to keep it in single shooting right here, but if you're shooting sports, you're gonna wanna go into one of these high-speed continuous because what happens when you do that, you hold down, it takes a bunch at a time. That might be great for you if you're shooting some fast action, shooting your kids, shooting someone running. And then these are your timer modes, 2-second timer, 10-second timer, and then this is a self timer that'll continuously shoot photos every 2 seconds. This metering mode, I like that to be on spot because I think that's more accurate for finding skin tones. So if I was in one of these modes, let's just say aperture priority, and it's determining the exposure for me, it's going to determine it based on where my focus point is and only that. So that's going to be a little bit more accurate for me versus if I had my metering mode on evaluative or partial, or this one is center weighted average, it's going to take into consideration the rest of the scene. And this is like a little bit darker. So personally for me, I like using that spot metering. I just find it to be more accurate when I'm in those situations where I'm using maybe aperture priority or I'm working with a flash and I'm using TTL. All right. Tapping here, I keep this anti-flicker off, although, you know, honestly, it would be good to enable it. You can enable it. That would just be helpful for you in case there's any weird light flickering happening. It's a good thing to just keep on. This Kelvin, this is where you change the way that the photo looks. So the higher the number here, the warmer the photo. See how it's getting warmer, warmer, warmer? There, see how that camera is getting, the image here is getting colder. Personally, if I'm being creative and I'm being specific, I will dial in my Kelvins. Of course, you have some presets here for like if you're shooting flash, that's a good white balance. If you're under tungsten lights, that's a good one. I really like keeping it on auto white balance, and white priority. This is a subtle difference you actually won't see right here, right now, because we have really great lights. White priority just keeps your whites versus them kind of looking a little bit yellow. Here, this is your picture style. I tend to keep this on standard, or if I'm photographing people, portrait. You'll probably be fine on standard, but like as you go through, you can like see, it's just like presets. It's making things a little bit more saturated or making things a little bit less contrasty or more. So I'm just gonna keep that on standard. Down here, these are creative filters. I tend to keep them off, but if you wanted to, you know, you've got grainy black and white, and I probably would adjust my exposure there. I've got soft focus, a fisheye effect, art bold effect. You might want to play with these. They are kind of fun, but just be mindful of when they're on, and then like you go to shoot something, you know, normal, you don't want to have those on because they're going to be a little funky. Now, if you're shooting in RAW, it's no big deal because you can always change anything you want. Couple more things here in this menu. This is the subject to detect. So you've got humans, you've got animals, and you've got vehicles. So I keep mine on people because that's typically what I photograph. All right, so that's everything in your Q menu, which honestly, I could end the video now and you would be totally great, but I just want to show you a couple more things. Over here, you've got your menu button. We're gonna tap on that. And this, you'll see some of these same things in here. Image quality, right? We can pick our RAW and JPEG. Do not have dual pixel RAW enabled. Our aspect ratio, maybe we wanna go in to do square photos or photos that are a 16:9 ratio. I do tend to keep mine at 3:2. And I can tap again, or I can use that dial on top. So this has a lot of the same stuff. I'm not gonna go through every little thing, but I'm gonna show you some of the things that I personally change out of the box. if I am photographing something that has a lot of white, but I want to keep detail, I will go to this highlight tone priority and I will enable it. Now with this, you can't go lower than your ISO 200, so that is a little bit of a factor. Unless you're photographing wedding dresses, you probably don't have to worry about that, but that is something I sometimes change. Sometimes this clarity filter right here, if we lower it, it's just going to help smooth out the photograph a little bit. This will only affect your JPEG, not your RAW. So if I'm photographing people, I'm gonna keep that right there. But if I'm photographing, let's say landscapes or detail photos, still life, I'm actually gonna up it maybe by 2. By default though, I do keep it at 0. All right, flipping through here. By the way, if you press in this little cue set, that's what goes into your menu as opposed to tapping it. Lens aberration correction, distortion correction, I keep all of these off. If you want to go back, you can tap menu or you can hit menu and it's going to go back. I keep my touch shutter disabled, but if you like to take photos by simply clicking and tapping, you might want to enable that. I don't like that, but that's because I tend to click to find a focus and then it starts taking a picture I don't want it to take. So I'm gonna go ahead and disable. Now, if you're gonna start recording movies, here are some of your movie recording size options. Because you can, by the way, when you're not in movie mode, you can just hit the record button and it's gonna start recording, but you'll notice some things change. It is better to go into the recording settings because then you're gonna have all of your settings here that you can like change manually and things like that. But if you want to, you can. And then that menu option right here, this section, you tell it what you want it to be recording at. This is a good one. Touch and drag autofocus settings. I like this option. So I actually enable it. We'll click on, set OK, and my positioning relative and on the right side. So this I like because while my face is up to here, I can click and drag to find my autofocus. I do have long fingers though, so I can easily click and drag while keeping my finger on the shutter button. All right, so going through right here, not much to say with all of these. There's nothing really that I change. This right here in this 6 blue menu, the highlight alert, this I absolutely enable. And what this does is when I play back an image, see this little like blinks that are happening right there? It's telling me where it's completely white. There's no detail whatsoever. And because I photograph weddings, I want to know when that is happening so that I make sure I'm not blowing out all the details of the dress. So that's crucial to me. That might annoy the crap out of you, but for me, that's a must-have so that when I'm shooting quickly on a job, I can tell if I'm overexposing and blowing out the dress. If you're not using Wi-Fi, I do suggest you keep it on disable versus enabling it because it does suck up your battery life a little bit. So just something to keep in mind. This menu right here, the only thing I mess with is if I have 2 cards in here and I want some of them to be the playback, or I want my movies to be recorded on one, or maybe my JPEGs on one and my RAWs on the other. And to do that, it's this recording options right here for stills. And then I can record separately or record to multiple. So if I wanted to do RAWs on one and JPEGs on the other, then I'm gonna hit record separately. I only have 1 memory card in here right now, so not much to show here, but if that's what I wanted to do, I would go back into the queue right here, and then you can see L and L. So I can just tap in here and I would change this one maybe to RAW, while the second one is on JPEG. So that's how that functions. Here, if you would like to customize the file names, you can. So maybe here you would tap in and you could have image underscore. If you want to, you can actually tap in the user setting and you can write in like your initials if you want to, so the file name has your initials in it. So just some preferences here. I've done that in the past, but then I got lazy. I don't really care what it's called. I end up renaming a lot of my files anyway. Nothing else in here I really changed. I keep all of this the same. So I think that's it. As far as a quick setup guide, those are all the things I want to show you. That's it. That's what I have for the quick startup guide for the Canon EOS R7. Remember to save this video. You're probably going to come back to it, and let me know in the comments if there's anything that I missed, that you don't understand, that you want to learn about. I'm happy to help, and I usually get to the comments, the nice ones. You be mean, I probably won't get to you. Jersey just comes out when I'm trying to defend myself. Anyway, hit like, subscribe, ring the bell. I have a ton of other videos for you here on this channel that's going to help you be a better photographer. Bye.